The sheriff's face was a mask of cold fury in my side mirror. His patrol car's lights painted my cabin silent, strobing bursts of red and blue. He wasn't pulling me over. He was hunting me. And the woman beside me was trembling so hard I could feel it through the passenger seat. It was one of those New Mexico nights where the air itself feels ancient. Dry, hot, and tasting of dust and distant rain that never quite arrives. I was parked at a little-known rest area off I-40, east of Gallup, a place the maps don't even bother to name. Not one of the big, brightly lit corporate plazas with its fast food joints and rows of identical rigs, just a strip of cracked asphalt with a couple of sun-bleached picnic tables and a view of a million acres of nothing. The moon was a sliver, a hangnail in the black velvet sky, and the stars were so bright they felt loud, like a faint, high-frequency hum just at the edge of hearing. I'd shut down the engine an hour ago, trying to get a few hours of sleep before the long, sun-blasted push on to Phoenix. The quiet was the whole point. Out here, silence is a commodity, more valuable than a full tank of diesel. I was just drifting off in my bunk, floating in that light, twitchy sleep you get on the road, where every nerve is still humming with the memory of the highway. It's a sleep where you're never truly gone, always listening for the hiss of air brakes, the rumble of another engine, the sound of trouble. And that's when I heard it. A soft but insistent tapping on the passenger side door. My eyes snapped open. I was instantly, coldly awake. Every instinct I've honed over 2 million miles and 20 years of bad choices screamed wrong dash. Nobody knocks on a trucker's door at 2 in the morning in the middle of nowhere unless it's trouble. Cops, lot lizards, or someone looking to get robbed or do the robbing. I've had my share of all three, and none of them ever lead to a pleasant conversation. The lot lizards you can usually scare off with a gruff word, they're just trying to make a living, sad as it is. The robbers are more dangerous, they look for the new guys, the ones who leave their doors unlocked or flash cash at the fuel desk. Cops, well, cops are the wild card. Some are just doing their job, some are looking for a reason to ruin your day, and some are just bored and want to flex their authority on a transient target. In the middle of the night, in a place this empty, you assume the worst. I laid there for a second, my ears straining, holding my breath. The tapping came again, a little more urgent this time. Tap 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 dash. It was delicate. Not the heavy, authoritative fist of a cop. Not the brazen, rhythmic knock of a working girl. It was something else. It was the sound of fear. Slowly, like a man defusing a bomb, I eased myself out of the bunk. The worn leather of the driver's seat creaked under my weight as I settled into it. My heart was thumping a low, heavy rhythm against my ribs, a slow drumbeat of caution. I keep a tire iron wedged next to my seat. It hasn't touched a lug nut in 15 years. Its purpose is purely psychological, both for me and for anyone who might get a look at it. I didn't reach for it, not yet. The first rule of the road is you don't escalate. You look. You listen. You assess. You assume everyone is a threat until proven otherwise. It's a lonely way to live, but it's kept me alive. I peered through the passenger window, my eyes adjusting to the gloom. Standing there, bathed in the faint, ghostly light from the far-off highway, was a woman. She was wearing a simple, pale yellow summer dress, the kind you'd wear to a church picnic or a small-town 4th of July parade. The kind of dress that had absolutely no business being at a desolate rest stop in the dead of night. Her hair was blonde, pulled back neatly in a clasp at the nape of her neck, and even in the gloom I could see her face was pinched with worry. She looked clean, respectable, and completely, terrifyingly out of place. This wasn't just a fish out of water, this was a canary in a coal mine. She was a sign that the air down here was poison. I cracked the window an inch. The desert air, smelling of creosote and cold stone, instantly sucked the recycled cool from the cab. "Can I help you?" My voice was gravelly with sleep and a healthy dose of suspicion. She flinched at the sound, a small, bird-like movement. She leaned closer to the crack in the window, as if the darkness itself might overhear her. Her voice was a shaky whisper, thin and brittle. "I'm so sorry to bother you. I live just over that rise," she said, gesturing vaguely with a trembling hand into the impenetrable darkness behind her. "It's your engine. Or something. That humming sound. I can't sleep." I frowned. My engine was off. The big Cummins was cold as a stone. My Freightliner Cascadia was a dead, metal beast, as quiet as the mesas watching us from the horizon. I was hauling dry goods, a full load of flat-pack furniture for a chain store in Arizona. The reefer unit that cools perishable loads was silent because there wasn't one on this trailer. "Ma'am, my rig's shut down," I said, my voice flat, giving her nothing. "There's no noise coming from here. No reefer running." She wrung her hands. They were slender, with clean, unpainted nails. A gold wedding band glinted faintly on her left hand. It looked heavy, like an anchor. "Oh. Well, it must be another truck, then. I'm so tired." I didn't know who else to ask. Something was deeply, fundamentally off. The story was thin as onion skin and twice as transparent. There were no houses, just over that rise. I knew the stretch of I-40 like the lines on my own face. It was reservation land and empty scrub for 50 miles in every direction. The nearest town was a collection of boarded-up buildings and a single blinking traffic light 20 miles back. She was lying. But it was the way she was lying that held me. It wasn't the practiced lie of a con artist. It was the clumsy, desperate lie of a bad actor in a place she never wanted to be in. The fear in her eyes was telling the truth. This wasn't a scam. This was desperation wearing a bad disguise. I've seen that look before. In a mirror, mostly, on long nights when the coffee runs out and the memories start to creep in. But I've also seen it on the faces of waitresses stuck in dead-end towns, their youth fading under the fluorescent lights of a 24-hour diner. I've seen it on runaways shivering at bus stations in the dead of winter, trying to look tough but fooling no one. It's the look of someone who's run out of road, out of options, out of time. It's the look of an animal caught in a trap, one that's already chewed its own leg off and still can't get free. "You all right, ma'am?" I asked, my tone softening just a fraction against my will. It was a mistake, showing that crack in the armor, but the question came out before I could stop it. Her carefully constructed composure didn't just crack, it shattered into 1,000 pieces. Her shoulders slumped, her chin dropped to her chest, and a small, choked sound escaped her lips. "No," she whispered, the word barely audible, a puff of steam in the cold night. "No, I'm not." Against every bit of my better judgment, against the part of my brain that had kept me alive and out of jail for 2 million miles, I reached over and thumbed the lock. It made a loud clack in the silence. "Get in," I said, my voice low and final. "Before someone sees you." She didn't hesitate. She practically fell into the passenger seat, pulling the door shut with a solid thunk that seemed to echo across the entire desert. She wrapped her arms around herself, though the cab was still warm from my body heat. She was trembling, a fine, high-frequency shiver like a plucked guitar string that you could feel in the air. I gave her a minute, just letting the quiet settle back in, letting her catch her breath. I looked at her properly now, in the dim glow of the dashboard lights I'd switched on. Maybe late 30s. Pretty, in a way that had been worn down by something hard and relentless. There were faint, faded bruises on her forearm, the kind you can cover with a watch or a long-sleeved blouse. Her eyes, a pale, watery blue, were darting around the cab, at the maps tucked into the sun visor, the logbook on the console, the big thermos of stale coffee. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the tools of my life, the tools of escape. "My name's Sam," I said, finally, breaking the silence. She took a shaky breath, her gaze finally landing on me. "Clara," she said. "My name is Clara." "Okay, Clara. You want to tell me why you're really out here?" She finally met my gaze, and her eyes were wells of pure, uncut fear. It was a look that went beyond simple worry. This was mortal terror. "My husband," she said, her voice cracking on the word. "He's the sheriff. Sheriff Brody. Of McKinley County." And just like that, the air in the cab turned to ice. The vast, empty desert outside suddenly felt small and confining, like the walls were closing in. A small-town sheriff. In his jurisdiction. With his wife. In my truck. Every alarm bell in my head wasn't just ringing, it was screaming a full-blown fire alert. This was the kind of trouble that doesn't just get you a ticket or a night in jail. This is the kind that gets you a busted-up rig, a career-ending file, a permanent black mark with every DOT officer from here to the Atlantic. Or worse. This is the kind of trouble that gets you a shallow grave in the desert. I've seen it. I've heard the stories at truck stops, whispered over greasy eggs and burnt coffee. Guys who crossed the wrong local big shot and either disappeared or wished they had. My friend Mike, who vanished up in Oregon, maybe this is how it started for him. A knock on the door, a woman with fear in her eyes. We never knew. His rig was found wiped clean at a rest area off I-5. Logbook was current, coffee was half full in the thermos. He was just gone. My hand instinctively went to the scar on my jaw, a faint white line hidden in my stubble, a permanent souvenir from a misunderstanding in a Texas bar a decade ago. That was over a spilled beer and a sideways look at the wrong man's girl. This was a whole other universe of stupid. Ma'am. Clara, I started, trying to keep my voice even, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. Whatever is going on between you and your husband, a long-haul truck is the last place you want to be. You need to go. Now. I'll give you some cash for a motel, but you can't be here. I can't, she pleaded, tears starting to spill down her cheeks, silent and hot, making clean tracks through the dust on her skin. You don't understand. He'll find me. If I go back, he'll kill me this time. I'm not exaggerating. She didn't have to. She pulled up the sleeve of her pretty yellow dress, and this time I saw it clearly in the dashlight. A constellation of older, yellow-green bruises and one fresh, ugly purple one, shaped distinctly like a thumb, high on her bicep. He finds me every time, she whispered, her voice raw with a history of failed attempts. I try to leave, he finds me. He has his deputies watch me. The nice woman at the women's shelter in town? She calls him the second I walk in the door. She has to, he's the law. The bus station? He knows the ticket agent. My sister lives in Flagstaff, but he calls her every week just to check in. I am in a cage. A cage with a badge on the door. I just sat there, the familiar diesel and coffee smell of my cab suddenly feeling like a tomb. I'm a truck driver. I haul freight. I don't rescue damsels. That's fairy tale stuff, and the road ain't a fairy tale. The road is asphalt and rules and 1,000 ways to die, and the number one rule is mind your own business. The smart play, the sane play, was to tell her to get out. To forget I ever saw her. Drive away and never look back. But I looked at her, at the geography of pain on her arm and the utter desolation in her eyes, and I didn't just see a stranger. I saw my ex-wife, Sarah. It hit me like a phantom limb aching, a memory I keep buried under miles of highway. A flashback, clear as day, not to a moment of violence, but to one of quiet despair. Sarah, standing in the kitchen of our small house back in Oklahoma, the one I was never at. It was a week before she told me she wanted a divorce in 2014. The late afternoon sun was coming through the window, catching the dust motes in the air. She was holding a coffee mug, her knuckles white. She wasn't bruised, not on the outside. My damage was different. It was the damage of absence, of neglect, of a million lonely nights and broken promises whispered over a crackling phone line. I was supposed to be home for our anniversary. I'd sworn I would be. I took a shorter run, a simple out and back to Dallas, something I could do in 2 days easy. But a surprise inspection at a way station outside Ardmore found a leaky airline. A simple fix, but it put me down for 6 hours. Then a wreck on I-35 shut the highway down for another 4. I called her, my voice full of excuses that sounded hollow even to me. I could hear the silence on her end of the line, a silence that was heavier than any angry words. When I finally got home, the next day, the small cake she'd bought was still on the counter, untouched. The 2 wine glasses were still sitting next to it. I found her in the kitchen, looking out the window, with that exact same trapped, hollowed-out expression Clara had now. The look of someone who'd been screaming for help for years, but the person who was supposed to hear her was on another frequency, somewhere on I-80 in Wyoming with a load of frozen chickens. I can't live like this anymore, Sam, Sarah had said, her voice flat, all the fight gone out of it. It's like being married to a memory. I'm so alone. I had offered to quit the road. To sell the rig. To do anything. I would have sawed my own legs off for her in that moment. But it was too late. The silence had already done its work. The foundation had rotted away while I was gone. I hadn't hit her, but I had abandoned her. And in that moment, sitting in my cab in the New Mexico desert, looking at Clara, I felt the sharp, bitter tang of that old failure. I hadn't been there to help my own wife out of the cage I'd unintentionally built around her. Maybe this was a chance to answer a different door. A chance to do it right, just this once. Where do you want to go? I asked, the words feeling foreign and heavy in my mouth. It was the dumbest and maybe the most important question I'd asked in 10 years. Relief washed over her face so powerfully it was like watching a light turn on in a dark room. Anywhere, she breathed, the word full of impossible hope. The next big city. Albuquerque. Phoenix. Just away. I have a little money saved. I can get a bus from there. Disappear. I nodded slowly, my mind shifting gears from sleep and suspicion to logistics. My brain, used to calculating risks, routes, fuel stops, and ETAs, started running a different kind of program. This wasn't a haul anymore. This was a smuggling operation. Okay. But not like this. He knows you're gone by now. He'll be looking for you. He'll have his people watching the highways. He'll be looking for a woman on her own, or a strange car. What do we do? She asked, her eyes fixed on me, trusting me. It was a heavy weight, that trust. Heavier than any load I'd ever hauled. He's not looking for a trucker who picked up a load and is heading west on his normal route, I said, thinking aloud, the plan forming out of the ether. You need to disappear until I'm clear of the county. There's an old, abandoned gas station about 5 miles west of here. The sign just says gas. It's been closed for 20 years, a ghost of old Route 66. Can you get there on foot, staying off the road, cutting through the brush? She nodded, her expression grim but determined. The fear was still there, but now it had a purpose. Yes. I know the place. We used to. I know it. I'll pull out of here in about 10 minutes. I'll drive legal, slow. 60 miles an hour. Make it look like I just woke up and I'm getting back to work. I'll pass you. Don't look at the truck. Don't even turn your head. I'll get to that gas station, pull over onto the shoulder like I'm checking my tires. You'll have maybe 30 seconds to get in the passenger side and get down on the floor. Don't get up until I tell you. You understand? Yes, she said, her voice firm now. Hope is a powerful drug. All right. Get out now. Go. And for God's sake, stay in the shadows. She gave me one last, grateful look that felt like a punch to the gut. She opened the door and slipped out into the darkness as silently as she had arrived. I watched her small form, a pale dress in a world of black and gray, melt into the sagebrush and juniper along the shoulder of the road. She was gone. I sat there for a long 5 minutes, the engine off, my heart hammering against my ribs. What in the hell was I doing? This woman could be lying. She could be a decoy for a hijacking crew waiting down the road. Her husband, the sheriff, could be a perfectly reasonable guy and she could be dangerously unstable. My trucker's brain, the one that valued survival above all else, was screaming at me to start the engine and drive east, away from all of this. But my gut, which had smelled trouble from Texas to Montana, told me her fear was real. The bruises were real. And the memory of Sarah's face was the realest thing of all. I took a deep breath, the air tasting of ozone and bad decisions. I downed the last of my cold, gritty coffee, and fired up the engine. The big Cummins diesel rumbled to life, the sound of familiar, thunderous comfort. I flipped on my lights, their beams cutting a clean white swath through the darkness. I did a quick, deliberate walk around of the rig, kicking the tires, checking the lines, making a show of it. Anyone watching, and I had to assume someone would just see a driver starting his day. I climbed back into the cab, released the brakes with a loud hiss, and pulled my 53-foot trailer onto the empty interstate, heading west. The road ahead was a black ribbon disappearing into a blacker desert. The 10-minute drive to the abandoned gas station felt like an hour. Every shadow on the road looked like a patrol car. Every flicker of light in my mirror was him. My palms were sweating on the steering wheel. I passed her, a fleeting shape huddled in the deep shadow of a concrete railroad trestle. As planned, I didn't slow down, didn't even glance her way. My eyes were fixed on the road ahead, my posture relaxed, just another anonymous trucker on a long, dark road. The old gas station loomed up on the right, its sign hanging crooked, its windows boarded up. It looked like the skeleton of some forgotten dinosaur in the starlight. I slowed, flicked on my hazards, and pulled onto the wide gravel shoulder, bringing the big rig to a halt with a long hiss of air brakes. I climbed down, grabbed a tire thumper from the side box, and started checking my trailer tires, making loud, deliberate thwacks against the rubber that echoed in the night. 1 minute. That's all I could give her. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her dart from the darkness. She was fast, a pale blur against the scrub. The passenger door opened and closed in a heartbeat. I finished my inspection, hitting a few more tires to sell it, taking another 30 seconds that felt like an eternity. Then I casually tossed the thumper back in the box, climbed back into the cab, and shut the door. She was huddled on the floor, tucked into the footwell, her knees drawn to her chest, making herself as small as possible. She looked like a frightened child. "Stay down," I whispered, not even looking at her. My eyes were already scanning the mirrors. "We've got another 20 miles before we're out of his county. Don't make a sound. Don't even breathe loud." I pulled back onto the highway, bringing the truck up to speed. 65 miles an hour. Exactly the speed limit. Not a mile over, not a mile under. Just a working man, hauling his load, minding his own business. The cab was silent except for the hum of the tires on the asphalt, the whisper of the wind over the mirrors, and the sound of two people barely breathing. The county line felt like it was 1,000 miles away. We were maybe 5 miles from it, so close I could almost taste the freedom, when I saw them. The headlights. A single vehicle, coming up fast behind me. Way too fast. My stomach clenched into a cold, hard knot. It wasn't a truck. It was a car, an SUV, and it was eating up the distance between us with predatory speed. It stayed behind me, pacing me, filling my mirror. Not passing. Just sitting there, 10 feet off my bumper, its lights blindingly bright. Then the lights flashed. Not the red and blue, just the high beams, once, twice. An unofficial signal. A command. "Crap," I muttered. "Is it him?" Clara's voice was a terrified squeak from the floor. "Don't know. Stay down. Don't move." The vehicle pulled out from behind me and into the left lane. It didn't pass. It drew level with my cab. It was a standard-issue Ford Explorer, black, with a civilian plate, but it had a small antenna array on the roof that screamed law enforcement. It was plain clothes. The passenger window slid down, and the driver, a man in a dark cowboy hat, motioned for me to pull over with a sharp, angry jerk of his thumb. He wasn't wearing a uniform, but he had the unmistakable look of a cop. A thick neck, a hard jaw, and eyes that were used to being obeyed. A deputy. Brody's man. I had no legal reason to refuse. Pulling over a commercial vehicle for an inspection is something they can do anytime, anywhere. Refusing would be an admission of guilt. I flicked my signal, a gesture of surrender, slowed the rig, and pulled over to the wide shoulder of the highway. Behind me, the Explorer did the same, parking at an angle, its headlights pinning my truck like an insect in a display case. I killed the engine. The silence that rushed in was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. "Stay on the floor," I hissed to Clara. "Do not move. No matter what you hear. Do you understand me?" A tiny, muffled yes came from below. I watched in my mirror as the deputy got out. He was a big guy, the kind that runs on cheap beer and resentment. He moved with a slight swagger, the confidence of a man who knows he holds all the cards. He didn't come to my driver's side window. He walked slowly, deliberately, around the front of my truck, his boots crunching on the gravel. Each step was a hammer blow against my nerves. He stopped at the passenger door. My blood ran cold. He knew. He had to know. Maybe she had a phone he was tracking. Maybe someone at the rest stop had a CB and called it in. Maybe he was just playing a hunch. It didn't matter. He was here. He tried the handle. Locked. He rapped his knuckles on the window, hard. Rap. Rap. Rap, open up. His voice was muffled but clear, laced with menace. I didn't move. My mind was a whirlwind of bad options. If I opened it, he'd find her. Game over. If I didn't, he'd have caused to smash the window and drag us both out. I was on a knife's edge, and both sides were a long way down. My hand was resting on my thigh, inches from the tire iron. Using it would be suicide. But not using it might be, too. I said, "Open the door, driver," he repeated, his voice louder, meaner. "This is an official inspection. Now." Then, from the floor, Clara spoke, her voice shaking but clear, a whisper of defiance. "Don't. Sam, don't." The deputy heard her. I saw his posture change in the mirror. He went still, then leaned closer, his face right up against the glass, trying to peer through the tint. Well. What have we got here?" he said, his voice dropping to a low, satisfied growl. He stepped back from the door, a slow, deliberate movement, and put his hand on the butt of his holstered pistol. This was it. The moment it all goes sideways. The point of no return. I thought about the tire iron again. I thought about the 20 years I'd managed to stay out of this exact kind of trouble. All of it burned away in a single night for a woman I'd met an hour ago. For a ghost in my kitchen named Sarah. And then I heard another sound. A different siren. Faint at first, a distant wail from the west, heading east toward us. It grew rapidly louder, cutting through the tense silence. A New Mexico State Police patrol car, flying down the opposite side of the highway. It saw our lights, saw the tableau on the shoulder, the big rig, the angled SUV, the man with his hand on his gun. Its siren chirped as it slowed, made a smooth, expert U-turn across the wide dirt median, and pulled up about 50 feet behind the deputy's Explorer, its own blue and red lights now joining the silent, strobing chaos. The deputy froze, his hands still on his gun. He looked at the state trooper car, then back at my cab. His face was a mess of frustration and pure, uncut rage. The state boys showing up had just ruined his party. Whatever he had planned for us, it had to be done quietly, unofficially, in the dark. A state trooper with a dashcam and a radio linked to a central dispatch changed the entire equation. This was no longer his private playground. The trooper, a young, professional-looking Hispanic man, got out of his car. His movements were crisp, economical. He left his hand away from his weapon, a sign of de-escalation, and walked toward us, his eyes scanning the scene. "Everything all right here, officer," he called out to the deputy, his voice calm and authoritative, the official voice of the law, not the thuggery of a local bully. The deputy reluctantly took his hand off his gun. He forced a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Just a routine commercial stop, trooper. Making sure this driver's logs are in order." He was lying through his teeth, but it was a plausible lie, the kind they teach you at the academy. "You need backup for a logbook check?" the trooper asked, his tone dry. His eyes scanned the scene, from the deputy to my rig, lingering for just a second on the passenger side door before moving on. He saw it all. Just being thorough, the deputy grunted. He shot one last, venomous glare at my passenger window, a look that promised this wasn't over. Then he turned and walked back to the trooper, meeting him between the two vehicles. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I saw the body language. The deputy, gesturing angrily at my truck, pointing first at the cab, then back down the road, probably telling some story about me driving erratically. The trooper stood firm, arms crossed, shaking his head. It was a jurisdictional pissing match, and the deputy was losing. After a minute, the deputy threw his hands up in a gesture of pure disgust, got back in his Explorer, and peeled out, tires squealing on the asphalt as he sped off into the dark, back toward his county. The state trooper watched him go, then walked up to my driver's side window. I lowered it, the motor making a soft whirring sound. "You okay, driver?" he asked, his eyes sharp and intelligent. "Just fine, officer." "Just getting a friendly welcome to your state," I said, my voice hoarse. I tried for nonchalant, but I'm pretty sure I failed. He didn't smile. He just looked at me, a long, searching look. That was one of Sheriff Brody's boys. They'd been running hot all night. Said they were looking for a stolen vehicle. He paused, his gaze flicking to my empty passenger seat, then back to my eyes. "You haven't seen a woman, have you? Blonde? Distressed? Sheriff's wife, apparently she's unwell. Wandered off. The official story. Neat. Tidy. It wasn't that she was battered. It wasn't that she was fleeing for her life. She was just a poor, sick woman who needed to be brought back to her loving, concerned husband. It was a story that painted anyone helping her as a kidnapper, an opportunist, a criminal. It was a good story. This was my chance to fold. To play dumb and get out of it. I could say I hadn't seen anyone. He'd leave, and I'd be in the clear. The smart play. But I thought of Clara, curled up in a ball on the floor, trembling. I thought of the ugly purple bruise on her arm. I thought of Sarah, standing alone in our kitchen. "No, officer," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "Haven't seen anyone but him. Been a quiet night." He held my gaze for what felt like a full minute. I knew he was reading me. He knew I was lying. But he also knew the game. He'd seen the deputy's aggression. He could smell the wrongness of the situation just as I had. He knew the stories about Brody's County. Finally, he gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. A silent acknowledgement. An understanding. "All right, then. Watch yourself. The desert can be a funny place at night." He tipped his hat. "Drive safe." He walked back to his car, and a moment later, he was gone, heading east, his taillights shrinking in my mirror. The silence in the cab was absolute, broken only by the faint ticking of the cooling engine. "You can get up now," I said, my voice rough. My hands were shaking. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles were white, trying to will them still. Clara slowly, painfully, unfolded herself from the floor and climbed into the passenger seat. She was pale as a sheet in the dim light. "He knew," she whispered, her voice full of awe. "That trooper. He knew I was here." "Yeah," I said, reaching for the key and starting the engine again. "I think he did. And I think he decided it wasn't his business. Sometimes, the best thing a good man can do is look the other way." We drove the rest of the way to Albuquerque in near silence. As the sun started to bleed over the Sandia Mountains, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and pink, she finally started to talk. And I understood that the bruises were just the beginning. She told me about meeting Brody 10 years ago. He was a deputy then, charming, respected. The town hero. He'd swept her off her feet. The control started small. Comments on her clothes, suggestions about which friends she should see. Then he became sheriff, and the town became his kingdom, and she became his most prized possession. The charm curdled into constant surveillance. He'd check her car's mileage, her phone records. The violence started after she confronted him about an affair. A slap. He cried afterward, begged for forgiveness. The classic story. But the next time it was a shove, then a fist. The final straw had been last night. He was drinking, she said, her voice flat, staring out at the dawn. He'd lost some money on a deal, something he was expecting. He took it out on me. It was worse than usual. When he was done, he just went to bed. Like he'd just taken out the trash. I laid there listening to him snore, and I knew. I knew if I was still in that house when the sun came up, I would die there. Maybe not tomorrow, but someday. So I grabbed my car keys and a little cash I had hidden in a shoebox, and I just drove. I didn't have a plan. I just drove until the gas ran out at that rest stop. "And the ledger?" I asked, my voice low. "I found his ledger," she said, her voice barely above a whisper as the first light of dawn filled the cab. "A little black book. He's old-fashioned like that. Hidden in a hollowed-out law book in his office at home. It had dates, names, amounts. Everything. It wasn't just local shakedowns. It was names of cartel contacts. Routes for shipments that his deputies would escort through the county. He's not just a dirty cop, Sam. He's a narco." And there it was. The second twist. The real reason. It wasn't just that she'd left him. It was what she knew. He wasn't just trying to get his wife back. He was trying to retrieve a witness and destroy evidence. My cargo wasn't just a person. It was a liability that could bring his entire empire crashing down. The danger level, which I thought was already sky high, had just blasted into the stratosphere. This was what happened to Mike. I was sure of it now. The story was he'd been up in Oregon, near the California border. A known trafficking corridor. He must have seen something. A handoff, a crooked cop, something. He must have mentioned it on the CB, or maybe he tried to help someone, just like me. And they just erased him. The thought made my blood run cold. I wasn't just helping a woman. I was interfering with cartel business. I didn't take the book, she continued. I was too scared. I took pictures of a few pages with an old burner phone I had hidden. It's not much, but it's a start. It's proof. The phone is in my purse. Who are you going to give it to? I asked, my voice flat. I don't know, she said, sounding lost again. The state police? The FBI? Who do you trust when the man you're running from wears a badge? That was a question I didn't have an answer to. The trooper had helped us, but he'd also walked away. How far up did the rot go? I pulled into a sprawling, anonymous truck stop on the west side of Albuquerque. The morning rush was on. Other drivers were fueling up, heading into the diner, their faces etched with the familiar weariness of the road. We were a needle in a haystack, and it felt good. The bus station is a few miles from here, I said, keeping my eyes on the controlled chaos of the lot. I'll call you a cab. It's better if we're not seen together again. She nodded, her eyes filling with tears again, but these were different. They weren't tears of fear. They were tears of gratitude. How can I ever repay you, Sam? I thought about the money in my wallet. The money for fuel, for food, for the next 1,000 miles. I thought about the target that was now painted on the back of my trailer. You can't, I said. And you don't have to. I pulled out my wallet, took out $300, more than I could really spare, but less than she needed. I pushed it into her hand. For the bus ticket. And for wherever you're going. She tried to refuse, her hand trembling, but I closed her fingers over the worn bills. Pay it forward sometime, I said. It's an old cliché, but out here, sometimes it's the only currency that matters. The cab arrived a few minutes later, a dusty yellow sedan. She got out of my truck, then turned back, one hand on the door, her face framed in the opening. Sam, she said, her voice thick with emotion. He'll have your license plate. Your truck number. He'll come for you. Let him, I said, my voice harder than I intended. This is a big country. And I don't stay in one place for long. It's what I'm good at. She looked at me, and for a second, I think she understood everything I wasn't saying. She saw the loneliness in that statement. She saw the cost of a life spent running, even when you're just hauling freight. It's a kind of freedom, but it's the freedom of a ghost. Then she smiled, a real, genuine smile that lit up her whole face. It was like watching the sun rise twice in one morning. Thank you, she said. Then she closed the door, walked to the cab, and was gone. I sat there for a long time, the engine idling, watching the cab disappear into city traffic. The sun was fully up now, harsh and bright. My cab felt huge and empty. The passenger seat looked like it had a story to tell. I was safe. I was alone. The two things that are always true in my life. I knew Brody would look for me. He had my description, my truck number, my plate. For the next few months, maybe years, every set of headlights in my mirror, every plain SUV that paced me for too long, would be him. I'd have to vary my routes, avoid New Mexico, be extra careful at way stations. He'd put my name and number out on the unofficial network, the one bad cops used to talk to each other. I was marked. I leaned my head against the steering wheel, the plastic cool against my forehead. I felt the folded, worn square of the photograph in my shirt pocket, right over my heart. The woman from Montana. From a lifetime ago. Another woman, another complicated goodbye. Her name was Ellen. I'd helped her get her horses moved to her sister's place in Wyoming after her husband died in a ranching accident. For a few weeks, I'd let myself believe I could have a different life. A life with the smell of hay and pine instead of diesel, a life with her warm smile instead of the cold glow of a GPS. But in the end, I couldn't do it. The road was in my blood. The quiet of her ranch felt louder than any highway. I left one morning before she woke up, leaving a note on the table that said all the wrong things. I chose the rig over a home. Again. I wondered if Clara would be just another ghost I carried with me, another story whispered to myself on a long, dark stretch of highway. Another face to go with Ellen's and Sarah's. Each one a monument to a road I didn't take. You drive this road long enough, you learn that you're not just hauling furniture or produce. You're hauling the stories of the people you meet. Their secrets, their fears, their hopes. You carry them for a few hundred miles, a silent passenger in the seat next to you. They trust you because you're a ghost. You're there, and then you're gone. A moving confessional booth with 18 wheels. And then they get out, and you're left to haul the silence they leave behind. That's the real cargo, and it doesn't have a weight limit.